welcome to Commanding on a Budget. This week's budget pick is Grim Discovery. Black has some powerful lands, and Crucible of Worlds is very expensive. If you have enough targets, this card gets you 2 cards for 2 mana, and without the life loss that would normally be associated with a card like that. Today we are going to take a look at a Rakdos Lord of Riots deck. Rakdos is a 6/6 flying trample for 4 mana, which might be enough to play him as a general on its own. But it's the fact that Rakdos rewards you for turning dudes sideways by making others you cast cheaper that makes him truly awesome. This deck can be built for around $50. Rakdos needs damage to be dealt in order for him to be cast. You could just play creatures and swing, but it would suck for your early game beater to be stopped by a Trinket Mage. The solution to this problem is to play creatures that ping. Goblin Fireslinger, Cinder Pyromancer, Cunning Spark Mage, Rakdos Ixbitter, and Volshock Sorcerer can ping creatures and players. Fireslinger can only hit players but is very cheap. Shepherd of Rot and Lobber Crew ping each of your opponents, which means they help cast Rakdos and then make your creatures much cheaper when he's out. Honden of Infinite Rage guarantees at least 1 damage on each of your turns. Infectious Horror and Pulse Tracker get in some damage on each of your opponents no matter who you attack. Lightning Reaver is hasty and hard to block, so if one opponent is open to attack, the rest of the table will be stuck taking damage from this guy. Lidzolda the Blood Witch turns any unneeded pingers or beaters into extra damage and cards. Gorgon Flail. Dealing 1 damage to a creature isn't that intimidating, unless the creature dealing the damage has Death Touch. Deathbringer Thoktar. Creatures tend to die a lot in Commander, and when they do, this guy will get huge. Give him Death Touch and you have a beastly machine gun. Plague Spitter pings everyone and everything on your upkeep, which means with Death Touch he's a very cheap sweeper. Rakdos is a great beater, and so are a lot of other creatures in this deck. Why not bring the hurt faster? Anger. In this deck it will have to get into the graveyard the old-fashioned way, after dying in combat. Crimson Mage. Paying 1 extra red mana to get haste seems like a good bargain. Hellraiser Goblin. Sure, your guys have to attack each turn if able, but no one ever said Rakdos was for sissies. Ogre Battle Driver. This deck can only hope to live the dream of having this guy on the board when you cast Rakdos. Free Mirror Battlesphere, anyone? Torrent of Souls. Why bother reanimating something if you can't turn it sideways the same turn? Dealing a little bit of damage whenever you can is nice, but if this deck is going to win, it needs to dish out crazy amounts of damage at one time. Curse of Bloodletting. Have a problem opponent you need to take out? This card will put a target on someone's head. Furnace of Wrath. Everything deals tons of damage. You just have to hope that it won't all be swung at you. Karavek the Merciless. People will think twice about casting all their expensive stuff with this guy out. Heartless Hitsugu will bring everyone's life totals down to a much more manageable range. Deathforged Shaman. Casting this guy for his normal price is underwhelming, but if Rakdos is out to make the colorless part of his cost cheaper, then he's an X-Burn spell on a body. Hellrider. This deck is all about sending your guys into the red zone, so why not make combat even more devastating? Mega Traitor to Mortals. Swing with a bunch of guys, get a lot of free mana to sink into his X cost, kill someone, then have a huge dude. Magmatic Force. Lightning Bolt isn't that great in Commander, unless you get one on every single turn. Wound Reflection. Even if you can't live the dream of having Havoc Festival and this out at the same time, you'll still be making your opponents hurt a lot. Soul Blast will let you laugh at those pesky wrath-happy people as you sacrifice your entire board and throw it at their face. Breath of Malfegor. With Rakdos out, this card will act as a ritual, allowing you to cast tons of creatures in one turn. Fancy enchantments and flashy spells are great, but it's good old-fashioned beats that will get you there. Molten Steel Dragon. The Phyrexian mana cost means you can run out a big fire breather very early in the game. Mirror Battlesphere. Most decks would consider it a late game beater, but Rakdos can easily drop at turn 5 for free. Inferno Titan picks off small blockers and is generally a fire-breathing nightmare. Artisan of Kozilek. Another potentially free creature that brings another creature to the battlefield with it. Falkenrath Marauders, a relatively cheap, flying, hasty beater that grows every turn. Woebearer, you don't want to run out of beaters. Goblin Assault will keep giving you cheap sources of damage. Moonfell Dragon makes all your creatures fire-breathe and is a good body in addition. Goblin War Driver, a cheap way to make your creatures swing for just a bit more damage. Hero of Oxid Ridge, you'd hate to have your creatures stopped by a bunch of tiny tokens. There isn't a lot of room in this deck for efficient instant speed removal since you need a lot of creatures, but you still need to be able to deal with a few things. Fleshbag Marauder will clear the way for your beaters, and you'll probably have a smaller creature to sacrifice so you can get a bigger body. Hate Flare turns sideways and then shoots someone or something for at least 5. Pyrohemia lets you deal everyone damage or wipe the board if you need to. Goblin Bombardment. If your dudes are going to be removed, then you can sack them instead to get in some extra damage. Terminate. It's just too cheap and efficient to pass up. Rakdos Charm. Every mode will be useful in this deck, even the damage one. Bogarden Hellkite. The flash is nice, and 5 damage will kill most creatures in Commander. Molten Tail Masticore. Sure, the upkeep cost can stink sometimes, but there are a lot of creatures in this deck, and being able to deal that much damage is worth it. Steel Hellkite. You're only out 2 enchantments in this deck. Biashino Heretic. Artifact removal that fits perfectly with the theme of this deck. Just to add that extra bit of pressure, this deck packs a few sources of discard. Scythe Spectre. The combination of discard and damage makes it a perfect fit. Sire of Insanity. Nobody gets a hand, but what do you care? You'll be able to cast anything you draw anyway. Skullrend. Everybody gets a Hymn to Turok, and you get some damage to make your guys cheaper. You'll need a way to keep the beats coming. Skull Clamp can turn all those tiny pingers you don't need anymore into cards. Mad Prophet. The haste makes him both a nice body and a good source of digging. Nullspine Dragon makes that big damage turn even sweeter. After putting so much hard work into dealing your opponent's damage, you'd hate for them to gain life and undo all your hard work. Skullcrack and Flames of the Bloodhand are emergency solutions to someone gaining a lot of life if you don't have an enchantment out. Havoc Festival. Not only does it keep players from gaining life, but they lose half of their life every turn. That's quite a clock. Sulfuric Vortex and Forsaken Wastes provide a constant source of damage in addition to preventing life gain. Now for the lands. Ackham Refuge, Bajuka Bog, Evolving Wilds, Grixis Panorama, Jund Panorama, Lava Claw Reaches, Piranha Marsh, Rakdos Carnarium, Rakdos Guildgate, Rix Maudie Dungeon Palace, Rocky Tar Pit, Tainted Peak, Terramorphic Expanse, Tressorhorn Sinks, Urborg Volcano, and 14 mountains and 7 swamps. For this deck, more so than others I've built, I'd suggest getting the good lands. Having such a mana-intensive general that you want to drop early in the game means you can't afford to stumble on colors. Basilisk Collar and Quietus Spike would be better alternatives to Gorgon Flail. Everlasting Torment, Reign of Gore, and Stigma Lasher are even more ways to prevent life gain. Goblin Sharpshooter and Grim Lavamancer are more powerful pingers. Macaeus the Unhallowed keeps Wraths from being such a blowout. Necropolis Regent isn't super expensive, but the heavy black requirement means you'll need a better mana base to cast it. Oversold Cemetery would keep your hand stocked with beaters. Platinum Angel and Platinum Empyrean would keep you from losing to your own cards if you're worried about that. Sheldred Whispering One. Casting her in the early game off Rakdos would seal your good board position. Urabrask the Hidden is another source of haste for your creatures. Wormcoil Engine is just an awesome colorless beater even if you don't get the life gain. Underworld Dreams is a great choice if your playgroup likes to get greedy with card draw. You should build this deck if you want a deck where every card puts more pressure on opponents. You love Rakdos and its crazy style of aggro. You don't care about your own life total. You want to play cards that don't normally get played in Commander. I'm not the best aggro player in the world, but playing Karsten Zozu has given me an appreciation for decks that go all in on damage and disruption. Sure, this deck could probably use some utility to smooth things along, but I thought that most Rakdos fans would rather just go all in on damage and mayhem. This deck is all about gutsy plays like sacrificing all your creatures for a lethal Soul Blast. What's the riskiest play you've ever made in Commander? Let me know in the comments section below, and as always, thanks for watching.